Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we are now going to be moving on to some MLB news, where over the weekend we saw a couple really devastating injuries take place for the Los Angeles Dodgers. They were facing off against the Kansas City Royals in a weekend series, and it definitely took a toll on the team. Now, ultimately, they were able to still win 2 out of the 3 games, so from that perspective, they were, able to hold up for themselves, but definitely a different outlook moving forward here for the Dodgers, as they saw injuries to 2 of their top players in Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Mookie Betts. So Yamamoto's injury took place on Saturday when he was pulled out of his start after just 2 innings. Yamamoto was dealing with some type of fatigue headed into this matchup, where earlier in the week we saw his start that was supposed to be on Thursday get pushed back, so it was clear the Dodgers pitching staff felt like they needed to give him a little bit more rest. He was working off of 4 consecutive starts of 100 or more pitches. It was, if I'm not mistaken, the first time in his MLB career. Obviously came over from Japan in the offseason, playing his first year here in America and in the MLB. But when you look at Yamamoto and how he's been going this season so far, and you look at the game log, he pitched a career-high 106 pitches in his most recent start leading into Saturday. That is at least 106 pitches against the New York Yankees, but had yet to hit 100 total through his early MLB career, and 4 straight games of 100 or more. So it was clear, from the perspective of his body, that he needed to sort of rest up a little bit more. They gave him those extra few days, but it was clear that something was still wrong. He had to tell his translator to communicate to the team after the second inning that he was really struggling with pain, and his performance on the field didn't necessarily indicate that. Just 1 hit and 1 walk over those 2 innings, but he ends up coming out of that game. The Dodgers end up losing the game, but more importantly, it is being currently classified as a rotator cuff injury. Now, we're at the point in the season where we're coming up on midway through the year. The Dodgers now at this point are, closing in on game number 81, and we've seen a number of pitching injuries occur over the past week or so, where it's Yamamoto, Justin Verlander as well, Kyle Bradish, all of these guys, for whatever different issue, are going down on the IL. Now, for Yamamoto, this is not seen as a season-ending injury, which is a huge win for the Dodgers, who last year we saw plenty of instances, not just with injuries, but some off-the-field stuff as well. Going to more so focus on the injuries of just not having their top-end guys when the playoffs came around. And obviously, I think just as big of a part of that in the postseason last year, when they ended up getting swept by the Diamondbacks, was the fact that their offense was just non-existent. Their top guys, in Mookie and Freddie Freeman, neither one of them really performed at any level, offensively at least. So, it's going to be, the point being, though, that they saw plenty of pitching injuries last season. They're hoping that they just can have their guys available at the right time. As awesome of a season as Yamamoto has had up to this point, and it's been really encouraging if you look at his stats across the board. He has a 2.92 ERA, a 1.068 whip, 0.7 home runs per 9, 10.2 strikeouts per 9. Everything has looked very solid for him up to this point, and very encouraging in terms of, the upside of him being able to be a, prime pitcher for them when the postseason comes around. But got to actually be available when the playoffs are here. So ultimately, Dave Roberts, their manager, said that he's going to not be throwing for at least 2 weeks, and we'll see what the situation sort of plays out there from there. We don't necessarily have a defined timeline as of yet, but probably something that they're just going to, I would imagine, again, based off of their experience last year, try and, keep Yamamoto as comfortable as possible moving forward here, not rush him back. And it helps the fact that the Dodgers currently are the best team in the National League, or second best team, I should say, behind the Phillies, who did just drop a series over the end of last week. But Dodgers sitting at 44-29. They have a pretty commanding lead over their division as things currently stand in the NL West. Padres are 8 games behind. So again, the Dodgers, they're going to try and be as careful as possible with these injuries, including the fact that Mookie Betts got hurt over the weekend as well. He was the leader in the MVP race according to DraftKings. I believe he was entering the weekend somewhere around plus 125. And on Sunday, he got hit by a pitch on his wrist. He went down, was sort of sprawled out on the ground, looked really concerning. Now, he is going to very likely be put on the IL within the next 48 hours. They're calling it a fractured bone in his wrist. No surgery is required, which is the big win for Dodgers fans and baseball fans in general who want to see Mookie out there, because it likely means this is another non-season ending injury, and ultimately, it's still a huge bummer, of course, but knowing that it's not going to cost him and the Dodgers the rest of the year is at least very encouraging. It's a huge loss still, considering the fact that Mookie has been phenomenal, and he holds 2 very important roles for the Dodgers in both being their primary shortstop and being their leadoff hitter as well. So we don't know what the full timeline is going to look like. Again, late summer is probably what I would expect, just purely off of speculation here. I think that he should be back for the playoffs, but again, we don't necessarily have the entirety of the timeline available to us just yet. But it does make it interesting, through the combination of his injury and Yamamoto, in terms of what the Dodgers are going to do as the trade deadline approaches, how aggressive they'll choose to be. They did just pick up Kevin Biggio for, whatever it's worth. Biggio is being, he's had a tough year for himself overall, for somebody who was once seen as a very promising player for the Blue Jays. Is hitting, I think, in total here this season just 200, and has been, again, just not up to the standards of what we were sort of expecting him to be. And so that's somebody that they can at least throw out there, but they're going to need more reinforcements. I would probably expect that they are going to avoid going the starting pitcher route. I think that they will be confident in who they have at the top of their rotation when the playoffs come around. But in terms of maybe adding some arms, I mean, listen, every team can add arms in their bullpen at the end of the day, but just having some players that can sort of help platoon and sub in for a lot of the production that Mookie provides there. Some defense as well at shortstop, because Gavin Lux was supposed to be their shortstop headed into the year, but he got moved to second base because he was struggling some in spring training. I'm curious whether they decide to try and roll him back out there at shortstop, or if he at this point is just comfortable enough at second base that they want to keep him there and try and find some sort of other option there on the open market, at least until Mookie comes back. But going to be really interesting to see how they choose to approach this. And listen, I think that the National League, for the most part, is wide open, where you're looking at, 4 teams as things currently stand that are 500 or are above 500. It's the Phillies, the Braves, the Brewers, and the Dodgers are the only 4 teams in the entire National League that have a record above 500. Now you got a lot of teams that are just sort of hovering in the picture and could potentially make a playoff push, but it's where the Dodgers probably feel pretty confident about where they're at right now. I would imagine they would like to, build themselves up a little bit more in terms of playoff seeding if they could find their way to number 1. I kind of have a hard time, especially with these injuries, imagining that they are going to surpass the Phillies, but all in all here, I think that things could have been a lot worse for the Dodgers based off of having your 2 top players go down literally within one day of one another. But ultimately, I don't think the level of concern should be all too high. If you disagree, let us know why in the comments section. But I did just mention the Philadelphia Phillies, who are coming off of a loss to a Red Sox team, and then ended up losing the 2 straight series losses now between them and the Baltimore Orioles over the weekend and the Boston Red Sox, who the Red Sox now 2 straight series wins for themselves against some prominent teams, the best of both conferences in the Phillies and the New York Yankees. So we are going to be taking a quick break here, and when we come back on the other side, analyzing where the Red Sox are at and whether or not their fans should be happy with where things currently stand. So stick with us, and we will be right back after this quick break.